Got it. Okay.
Alright, so our group had green infrastructure and the sustainability principles by Stu, Fiona, Vanessa, and Ryan, me. So our driving question was, do impervious surfaces result in thermal pollution of storm water running into Lamberton Creek, and if they do, how?
So for the first one, it is to integrate green infrastructure elements within municipal plans. And basically green infrastructure can be used within any area of municipal government. And municipal government is government that provides local services, facilities, safety, and infrastructure for communities. And then green infrastructure also works well with the conservation and preservation of natural systems. Green infrastructure should be widely used throughout communities. And green infrastructure can often support recreational uses, and it also encourages healthy activities.
So we hear about green infrastructure, but what actually is green infrastructure? Well, green infrastructure is anything that uses any natural resources such as trees, grass, or mulch to utilize any stormwater in positive ways. So kind of counter to that, you can go to the next slide, is impervious surfaces. And impervious surfaces are structures that are covered by impenetrable materials. So as opposed to green infrastructure where they're permeable and they can soak up storm water and get all the toxic chemicals that will run off, impervious surfaces are kind of an enemy to it, and these create runoff for these chemicals to go into the lakes and natural resources. So a little more on that, go to the next slide, is impervious surfaces do a lot of negative things to the environment, such as the pollution with the chemicals, antifreezes, gasolines, oils, all from your vehicles are going off onto the road. And since they don't get soaked into the ground, they just sit there until the only way for them to actually leave the pavement is for the water to roll over it, and then it takes it away to wherever it's going to go. Because it doesn't stay on the road, it just keeps on following the water until it goes into a lake, which is where our drinking water comes from. And this can come off rooftops, off buildings, roads, whatever, and there's a lot of bad stuff too that collects on rooftops. And so basically anything that's not going to soak up your water, it's going to run into lakes and streams. There's also an issue with flooding with impervious surfaces. Since it's not permeable, the water is going to be able to be more susceptible to clog up in certain areas and can create like a lot of like areas you see, streets and stuff, that water doesn't soak in. So the places that get affected are the places that are downhill to a lot of those impervious like urban areas. It just runs down and it'll collect up in like a park or something like you see in like Grand Rapids. And what's helped this is trees and grass. So go to the next slide. So green infrastructure, this is what we kind of want to focus on positively. The good things of green infrastructure are reduced runoff. So like what I mentioned with all the pollutants and stuff, and also the water, that stuff's going to go into a positive area, which is in the ground. So that we'll see a decrease in the amount of chemicals in lakes and streams. Less sewer overflow also. When the sewers build up, you see them running down the road, and basically that empties out. Actually, I have a storm sewer that empties out into my backyard from the road, into like the side in between my house and my neighbor's house, and that's actually pretty disgusting. Like you can see like trash, you have to like clean it up and stuff. It's pretty gross. It also helps with controlling the amount of thermal pollution that we get because it's not, sun's not beating down on pavement, it's on grass and trees. It's also good too for little habitats for squirrels or like chipmunks or any urban animals, like a lot of like birds and stuff will just hang out in there. So it's not only helping people, but it's also helping wildlife in urban areas.
And thermal pollution is one of the effects of impervious surfaces, and I'm going to talk about the science behind thermal pollution. The sun heats the earth through radiation, and radiation is a transfer of heat through electromagnetic waves. And the sun's radiation hits impervious surfaces like pavement and heats it up, and dark pavement absorbs more heat than like lighter pavements or other types of impervious surfaces. And since water doesn't have anywhere to go and it can't flow through the pavement, it sits there and is heated by conduction, which is the transfer of heat through direct contact. And the hot water then runs off into the lakes and streams, increasing the temperature of them. And when the water temperature increases, fish and plants aren't used to that, so they start to die and they can clog up rivers like that. Those are all fish. And water needs to be able to flow over natural, like permeable surfaces because it controls the temperature of runoff. Since grass and other natural surfaces don't heat up as easily as pavement, when the water rests on it, it doesn't get hotter. It stays a good temperature for the lakes and streams. And it filters out pollutants like oil and all the nasty stuff that gets on your tires from the road.
So now we're looking at a place where they're thinking about building a retail center and how that would affect the environment surrounding it. So over here it looks like there's some kind of a body of water, and if they built the retail center here, they would have to put in parking lots. The building process of it would create like cement and more impermeable surfaces. Whereas if you look at it right now, it looks like it's all permeable or something that would be naturally found there. It would affect this body of water that is next to it in a harmful way with like car fuel, if there was a leak in a car, or trash just thrown on the road, or other things that would just be on like a parking lot or something. Something that they could do to prevent some of that is, like in the parking lots, they could have like planted areas around like the light posts or something like that ways. So that's something they could do to help that.
Thank you.